You have a lot of voter fraud. The way you stop it, the easiest way is voter identification. We have to go and think about that. I hope Republicans and Democrats can both sit down and work something out on voter ID.
But your commission on voter fraud didn't find any actual fraud. It did.
Well, we let the commission was having a tremendous problem legally getting papers from various states like California. They were absolutely hardlining. They didn't want to give this commission. It was just a quick commission headed up by Vice President Pence to look at voter fraud. The problem the commission had is we had to have a vast amount of lawyers, which I didn't want to bother with, because California and other states were giving up no information whatsoever. And the reason they weren't giving up information is because they were guilty. They were guilty of it, and they know they're guilty of it. Many, many people voted that shouldn't have been voted. Some people voted many times. What I'm saying is we need voter identification. We need voter ID.
I know it's not a top priority for you to Greenland, but when you go to Denmark, is there something you're going to want to talk to them about?
Maybe. I don't think Denmark has been absolutely set in stone yet going there. But if I did, I'd certainly talk about it. But not top on the list.
How much do we think it's worth?
We haven't gotten there yet. First, we have to find out whether or not they have any interest. Look, they're losing almost $700 million carrying it. That's a lot of money for Denmark. They're losing a tremendous amount of money. So we'll see what happens.
This Fox News poll the other day, I don't know what to make of polls at this point, but it's...
Well, Fox has always given me, I'll tell you, Fox is a lot different than it used to be, I can tell you that. Juan Williams. Then they have the wonderful woman that gave Hillary Clinton the questions. That was a terrible thing. And all of a sudden she's working for Fox. What's she doing working for Fox? Fox has changed. And my worst polls have always been from Fox. There's something going on at Fox, I'll tell you right now. And I'm not happy with it. I don't know what's happening with Fox, but when they have like a Juan Williams who's never said a positive thing, and yet when I show up at the Fox building, he's out there, oh, sir, could I have a picture with you? Could I have a picture? And he was 100% nice. I mean, you've never asked me for a picture.
I have not. Should the Murdochs change the management at Fox, or should they bring...
No, they have to run it the way they want to run it. But Fox is different. There's no question about it. And I think they're making a big mistake because Fox was treated very badly by the Democrats. Very, very badly, having to do with the debates and other things. And I think Fox is making a big mistake because, you know, I'm the one that calls the shots on the really big debates. I guess we're probably planning on 3 of them. And I'm not happy with Fox. I'm certainly happy. I think Sean Hannity and Lou Dobbs, and I think Tucker Carlson and Laura and Jesse Waters and Janine. We have a lot of great people. Even Greg Gutfeld, he wasn't good to me 2 years ago. Now he sees all I've done. He said, would you rather have a great president or a nice guy? I don't know. I think I'm a nice guy. But nobody's done in 2.5 years what I've done. And I say that a lot, and very few people can challenge it. The first 2.5 years, nobody's done what I've done in terms of tax cuts, regulation cuts, the military, the vets, the choice, so many different things. Nobody's done that. Yeah.
Can you clarify what you meant when you said that you don't want to do business with Huawei? Are you not going to extend this license for 90 days to temporarily allow?
Well, I'm talking to my people, but ultimately we don't want to do business with Huawei for national security reasons.
But not even a temporary extension?
We'll see what happens. I'm making a decision tomorrow. It could be temporary, could be, and maybe not. But we're going to make a decision tomorrow.
So what I'm asking about the Fox poll that they had you underwater against Remain.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Every place I go, we have lines outside. Then we have even phony stuff with that. You guys were in New Hampshire. Maggie was there. You saw that room was packed. And they had they had thousands of people outside. And then I see some phony website, some wise guys put up, that place was packed. And the New York Times actually saw that. And actually there was a massive flag behind, and even the seats behind the flag where you had no view. Because those people came down to be on the floor. But all of the people, any empty seat, you had the people come down to be on the floor because they were so far away. Plus you had a big flag. Look, we had, I think they said 17,000 people outside that couldn't get in. The fire marshals closed it at a certain level. The arena announced, I don't know the people at the arena, that I broke Elton John's record. And then I have fake news. The fact is that people tend, during a speech that I make, they love to come down to the floor if they're sitting in the high areas. And they're not allowed, for fire reasons, to have any more people. So that was an amazing evening. And you saw the enthusiasms. But we had a lot of people sitting behind that massive American flag that couldn't see. So they moved over and they moved down and they came down to the floor as the speech started. But Maggie Haberman was very fair, and she was there, and she saw the beginning of that speech. Every seat was packed. But then they tend to come down. They do it all the time.
But Mitt Romney did his last rally there the night before the election, and it was packed. He ended up losing the election.
Oh, I don't know. I fell. What can I tell you? Do I think I'm going to win? Yes. Do I think I have more enthusiasm now than I had before this, the 2016 election? Yes. I think you people do too. And some of you have reported it. I think there is more enthusiasm for President Trump than there was even for Mr. Trump. Because what I said that I was going to do, I did. The tax cut, the regulation cuts, the biggest in history. In 2.5 years, more than, and that's one of the reasons our jobs are so good, because of the regulation cuts.
So why can't you tell us when you talk to President Xi?
I just don't want to comment on that.
Is there a call set up for next week?
Well, I can speak to him anytime, but he understands how I feel. I just can't comment as to whether or not I spoke to him. But I will tell you this. We're having very, very substantive talks with China and with others, but with China.
Did you watch any of the coverage of that Hong Kong protest, huge numbers of people?
I can't believe it. I tell you, I've never seen 2 million people. When you talk about crowd size, Maggie, those are serious crowds, the Hong Kong crowds. I mean, that when they said 2 million people on the streets, that really looked like 2 million people on the street. No, I think it would be very hard to deal if they do violence. I mean, if it's another Tiananmen Square, I think it's a very hard thing to do if there's violence. And, that I'm president, but that's a little beyond me because I think there'd be tremendous political sentiment not to do something. So I hope, because I think we're going to end up doing a very good deal. And I think China, by the way, needs a deal much more than we do. But I really do believe that if this weren't part of the deal, possibly something would have happened already a long time ago.
Do you support the principles of the protesters, the pro-democracy?
Well, I'll tell you what I do support. I support liberty. I support democracy. I understand what's going on very well over there. I'd love to see it worked out in a humane fashion. And I think they have a great chance of doing it. Look, I put out, and I told you, that I really believe, I have a confidence in the talents of President Xi. I think if he met with the protesters within a very short period of time, they would work something out that's good for everybody. I really believe that. He's a very talented man. I mean, aside from everything, he's a very talented man. He's very smart, very talented, and I know him well, probably as well as anybody. And I believe if he sat down with them, now, that's not his deal, sitting down with people. He doesn't do that. But I think maybe the world changes. I really believe if President Xi sat down with representatives of the protesters, and they do have representatives, pretty good representatives, pretty strong representatives. I've been watching and seeing them. If he sat down, I think he'd work something out, and I think it would be good for everybody. But it does put pressure on the trade deal. If they do something negative, it puts pressure. Now, that deal I can sign by myself. It's structured so I don't have to go to Congress. But I respect Congress. I respect the views of Congress, and I respect, most importantly, the views of the people of our country. And I think it would be much harder for me to sign a deal if he did something violent in Hong Kong.
Do you support cutting $4 billion in foreign aid?
Are you talking about the rescission? Yeah, I support many of those things. We'll negotiate it out. But, I've cut back a lot on countries. We give billions of dollars to countries that don't even like us. And I've been cutting that a lot. We give billions and billions of dollars to countries that don't like us even a little bit, and I've been cutting that. And we just put a package of about $4 billion additional dollars in. And in some cases, in some cases I could see it both ways. In some cases, these are countries that we should not be giving to.
How do you see that cutting aid to them is helping the United States, though? Does it make us safer? Does it make us...
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And if I thought it would, I'd probably do it. But, I cut back $1.3 billion a year to Pakistan. And when I cut it back, I have a better relationship with, as you know, the president came in and we have a great relationship. Prime Minister came in. We have a great relationship with Pakistan now. We had a really good meeting. So what happened, I cut back $1.3 billion. We have a better relationship now. I also cut it back on the Palestinians because they speak very badly about our country. So I cut it back on the Palestinians. We were paying $500 million a year. Now we're paying nothing. But I think we're going to get further because I could see opening that up again. I think we're going to do much better the way I'm doing it. We're trying to negotiate a peace deal. Everybody said that's the deal that's totally impossible. They talk about a deal between the Palestinians and the Israelis as the toughest deal you could possibly do, no matter what deal you're talking about. And I stopped payment on $500 million a year, but I think they're going to make a deal. And I think one of the reasons they'd want to make a deal is because of that, okay?
Are you going to wait till after the Israeli elections to put out the Middle East peace plan?
I probably will wait, but we may put out pieces of it. We have some very talented people. As you know, our great ambassador and others, we have some very talented people. But that's probably the toughest deal of all. Peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, because they've been decades of hate. And it's tough to make a deal when there's that much hate. But I think I've helped it very much by saying, look, until there's a deal, we're not going to pay you anymore. And other people should have done that long before me. So these are things, when you talk about rescission, that's not part of rescission, by the way, but we have a lot of things like that in the rescission. Phil?
You're heading back to Washington after a week off. Do you have any thoughts on the cabinet? Is the cabinet solid and going to stay in place?
I think we have a great cabinet. Yeah, there'll always be people change because, after you're going to be 3 years now, it's a long time. They're under a lot of pressure. But I think we have a great cabinet. I really do. I think our cabinet is terrific. Some of them will leave for a period of time. They may come back. I mean, the relationship I have is very good with the cabinet and with others. But, it's almost 3 years now, if you can believe it, right? And at a certain point of time, people do tend to leave.
Are you still considering withdrawing from NAFTA if Nancy Pelosi doesn't bring up the USMCA on the House floor?
Well, I haven't said whether or not I would, but I would say NAFTA is one of the worst deals ever made in the history of trade deals. If you look at NAFTA and you take a look at what it's done to our country, thousands of factories closed, millions of jobs. It's been a one-way street. And the USMCA is a great deal. The unions love it. The farmers love it. Everybody wants it. But it's up to Nancy Pelosi. If she wants to put it for a vote, she's going to get overwhelming bipartisan support. And I view that as a bipartisan deal. I would imagine she'd put it up. There's an easy thing to do. It will be totally bipartisan, which is good for the Democrats and the Republicans. And everybody wants it. I mean, the unions like it. The unions hated NAFTA, but they love the USMCA. The farmers above all love it, especially the American farmers. Our farmers love it more than the other two sides. They love it. So a lot of good things going, but we have to see. They have to put it up for a vote. It's political season, if you haven't noticed, so they have to put it up for a vote.
You talked about some people coming back into the administration. Could Nikki Haley come back into the administration in any role?
Yeah, at some point, maybe if she wanted to. Yeah.
Talking to her about that?
I really haven't. I've been talking to a lot of people. No, I'm very happy with Mike Pence. I think Mike Pence has been an outstanding VP. I think that he's been incredible in terms of the love that a lot of people, especially if you look at the evangelicals and so many others, they really have a great respect for our vice president, and so do I. And so do, I think, most people. No, I would I wouldn't be thinking about that. A lot of people, you know, amazingly, they bring different names up, and they brought a lot of different names up. And that's, by the way, at some point I'll let you know, but that's, by the way, standard. You know, that's standard. Everybody thought that President Obama was going to change Biden. They all thought that in the, you know, second term he was going to change. Everybody thought it, and he didn't do that. But no, I'm very happy with Mike Pence. Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Can you just be a little clearer on your gun position? I don't know.
The which one?
Your position on background checks and guns.
So Congress is looking at it very strongly, bipartisan. I put in certain parameters which you somewhat know about. I'm also very, very concerned with the Second Amendment, more so than most presidents would be. People don't realize we have very strong background checks right now. You go in to buy a gun, you have to sign up. There are a lot of background checks that have been approved over the years. So I'll have to see what it is. But Congress is meeting, bipartisan. A lot of people want to see something happen. But just remember this, big mental problem, and we do have a lot of background checks right now.
So you're not willing to support universal background checks right now?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying Congress is going to be reporting back to me with ideas, and they'll come in from Democrats and Republicans, and I'll look at it very strongly. But just remember, we already have a lot of background checks, okay? Thank you. Say it?
Have you spoken to Wayne LaPierre this week?
I have. Well, I spoke to him a week ago. And look, I've had a great relationship with the NRA, and I will always have a great relationship. I've been very good for the NRA. If you just look, I mean, we have now 2 Supreme Court justices, great ones, and who would have thought that was going to happen in, you know, long prior to 3 years. So we have 2, and equally importantly, we will have within another 90 days 179 federal judges. And I say, thank you very much, President Obama, because he was unable to get them filled. I don't know what happened to him, but he was unable. So President Obama did not do his job, and I inherited 138 empty positions. And honestly, from his standpoint and the standpoint of where he's coming from, that shouldn't have happened. And we did do one other thing I saw last night where some people were talking about criminal justice reform. Very liberal Democrats. I'm the one that got it done. And I saw that and I said, you know, isn't it a shame? You do something, and I've had very conservative people wanting it and very liberal people wanting it. But if you take a look at that reform package without Donald Trump, it doesn't happen. And you know what? I don't need the credit. I get enough credit. But they never even mentioned my name. And these were people that were begging me to do it, calling me, begging me like you've never seen. And now that criminal justice reform is done, beautiful package, wonderful, they don't even mention my name. So stupid, so stupid. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There you have it, the president returning from a 10-day vacation to warnings of an impending recession amid his multiple ongoing trade wars. And there you see him going up the stairs after taking more than 30 minutes to talk with reporters, answering questions on everything from the economy to Afghanistan to guns and more. Here's what we can tell you about what he was doing in his time away. He spent that time in New Jersey. The New York Times says President Trump spent much of that time privately worrying about the economy and how it could hurt his chances of being reelected. CNN's Kristen Holmes is live near the President's Golf Club, where he spent the last 10 days. Kristen, some economists say we could have real problems on the horizon when it comes to the economy. The president just talked to the press there before boarding Air Force One. What more did he say about these warnings?
Well, Anna, it was clear that that was what he wanted to talk about. As you said, he was there for about 30 minutes talking about everything from Afghanistan to gun control. But the initial out-of-the-bat statement he made was about the economy, clearly weighing on him. We're hearing all of these analysts, as you said, saying that there is a potential for a downward turn of the economy. And here's what President Trump had to say. Take a listen.
I don't see a recession. I mean, the world is in a recession right now. And although that's too big a statement, but if you look at China, China's doing very, very poorly. They've had, I just saw a report, they've had the worst year they've had in 27 years because of what I've done. and they want to come to the negotiating table. You know, they're having companies lose. I mean, they're leaving. The companies are leaving, and they're laying off millions of people because they don't want to pay 25%. And that's why they want to come to the table. I don't think there's another reason other than President Xi, I'm sure, likes me very much, but they're losing millions and millions of jobs in China. And we're not paying for the tariffs. China is paying for the tariffs for the 100th time. And I understand tariffs very well. Other countries, it may be that if I do things with other countries, but in the case of China, China is eating the tariffs.
Now, President Trump also said that they were in meetings with China, that they were going well. Very interesting here to watch him talk about it because it was almost exactly what you heard from Peter Navarro and Larry Kudlow, who were put out there on this topic earlier today, that we're not seeing a recession, essentially denying all of the things that we're hearing from these economists and from our farmers on the ground, saying that the tariffs are not impacting people, that America is not bearing the burden of these trade wars, which, in fact, we don't know to be true. We have seen a report come out from these independent researchers who say that actually 95% of that price change is going to fall on U.S. importers, where only 5% is going to fall on China. But Anna, it is not surprising that this is something that would really concern President Trump. The economy is a central issue in a campaign. 2020 is coming up, especially here when we have President Trump, who has made it the central focus of his campaign. It's always big when there's a presidential incumbent, but he has really relied on it there. And Anna, I just want to mention one other thing there. We know President Trump can be a polarizing figure, and I have talked to voters across the country, many of whom tell me that while they might not like President Trump, they like what he's doing with the economy. So that's potential lost votes if the economy does in fact tank.
And the polls, of course, back that up. It's the one issue in which the president is not underwater when it comes to approval of the job he's doing. Kristen Holmes, thank you for that reporting. Let me bring in Harry Enton, who's with me, as well as Elena Plott. She is a correspondent with The Atlantic. Thank you both for being here. Guys, when we talk about the economy, Harry, I'll just turn to you first. What does it mean for the president's re-election chances if the economy tanks?
I mean, look, I've looked at this. You mentioned it. The economy is the one issue he's consistently above water on. His overall approval rating can't get above 45% with voters. I would say if the economy went in a downward direction, it would probably tank his own re-election campaign. We know, I basically crunched the numbers comparing job growth to re-election margins, and what essentially we see right now is, given the job growth, the president would probably be a slight, actually, favorite for re-election. But if, let's say, job growth got slashed in half, then he would join the ranks of, say, Jimmy Carter in 1980 or George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992, and he would be a heavy underdog for re-election.
The president also weighed in on Fox News before heading back to the White House. Let's listen.
I'm not happy with Fox. I'm certainly happy. I think Sean Hannity and Lou Dobbs, and I think Tucker Carlson and Laura and Jesse Waters and Janine. We have a lot of great people. Even Greg Gutfeld, he wasn't good to me 2 years ago. Now he sees all I've done. He said, would you rather have a great president or a nice guy? I don't know. I think I'm a nice guy. But nobody's done in 2.5 years what I've done. And I say that a lot, and very few people can challenge it.
Elena, I don't know if you caught that, but the president just referred to Fox News as we.
Yeah, Anna, this is something I think that he has had with regard to a Freudian slip quite often over the last 2.5, 3 years. But, you know, it's always been interesting to me, as somebody who has covered this White House, is currently covering his re-election campaign, that he would choose to harp on Fox News in this way. I was just at the last campaign rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the reality is that voters and those who support this president the most, if he says that Fox News is not the place to get news from, they will change the channel. I mean, they see Fox not so much as the prism through which they understand this president. They see the president's words themselves as the way through which they understand him. And going back to your and Harry's conversation, I think this is why the economy he feels particularly vulnerable on. When it comes to issues like immigration, for instance, I was speaking to voters who said to me, well, he said he built the wall, so it's there. We know, of course, that's not true. Less than 50 miles of Trump's border wall have been constructed. But because he tells him that, they believe that is, in fact, the case. The economy, though, could be something different, where it's something that they actually are feeling at a granular level on the ground. So if it gets to a point where Trump is telling them the economy is fine, that they are not feeling that intimately, such as a farmer, for instance, that could really hamper his re-election chances.
Harry, the president seems specifically upset about Fox News polls that show him losing in head-to-head matchups, at least at this point in the election cycle, up against these 4 Democrats.
Losing all of them.
Right. But, I mean, you're a resident polling expert. Do you see anything fishy about these Fox polls?
No. And I know the people who do those polls, and they are genuine professionals. Their polls are consistently quite accurate. Those polls reflect what we see in other polling numbers, that the president is underwater, that he is trailing the potential Democratic candidates, and that shouldn't be such a surprise given that he's underwater. That's what we would expect. Incumbent elections are usually reflections of the incumbent, and given that the president's underwater, it's not surprising he's losing to all those different Democrats.
Elena, you talked about having spoken with a number of Trump voters at their rallies, in particular at his rallies, and you talk about how they're impacted by some of his current policies and maybe not in as great of a way as they had hoped back when he was in his 2016 promise-making stage. Do you believe his voters, his base core supporters, are as excited as they were last go around?
I think what was so fascinating to so many observers about the 2016 election, among many things, was how viscerally Trump was able to connect with so many different people. And as I wrote in my last dispatch from Manchester, I do think this kind of boils down to an element of human nature, which is that the chase is more exciting than the catch. You see that in any element in human life, but particularly when I go to rallies, I see that, you know, whether it's a rally goer or Trump himself, he gets so much more excited. They get so much more excited just by kind of reminiscing about when Make America Great Again was the slogan. Keep America Great. You know, for some reason, especially President Trump, these last several rallies, he's kind of cheer tested the crowd on this slogan. He always says, do I want to get rid of Make America Great Again, the greatest slogan of all time, or do we want to have it at Keep America Great? There's just an element there that, you know, it's not as fun when you feel that you're no longer the underdog and you're trying to protect what's yours against a so-called villain who Trump doesn't even know who to identify as yet.
I'm going to turn to the Democrats because we've seen the Democrats on the campaign trail this weekend, particularly courting the black voter, Harry. And I know the latest polls also show Joe Biden really with a wide lead there among support of the black vote. But your analysis shows when you break it into generational portions, there's something he should be concerned about.
Yeah, among younger African-American voters, his support isn't nearly as strong. In fact, I modeled it out, and basically what my model suggested was that African-American voters under the age of 30, his support among them is probably actually less than 30%. He may not actually be leading. He may be actually in a tie with Bernie Sanders with those younger African-American voters. And that's something that I think we see across the spectrum, right, is that those older voters, no matter what their race is, they are much more firmly in Joe Biden's camp than those younger voters, and that's true within the African-American community as well.
How concerning should that be, though?
I mean, look, he's ahead in the polls right now, so it shouldn't be too concerning. But obviously, if let's say that, tie among those younger voters in the African-American community becomes a lead for another candidate, that would be far more concerning. And it's going to be interesting to see how this develops, right? We know that Joe Biden has a large lead in part because he was the vice president to the first African-American president. But let's see what happens as some of these other candidates become better known, whether or not Biden's able to hold on to that advantage.
Harry Enten, Elena Plott.